Welcome back to Docket Decoder. In today's video, we're going to continue to look at the hidden true crime situation. And specifically, I want to look at the video that Dr. John put out recently in response to his wife's 9-hour live stream marathon. So, Dr. John's video dropped about almost 2 weeks ago, and it's been interesting to watch how since then things have gone pretty quiet. That video stirred up a lot of discussion and controversy online, but ever since then, both Lauren and Dr. John have remained pretty silent about the whole situation. Lauren has gone back to posting about her usual content, but there's been no real follow up or any kind of clarification from either one of them about the backlash or the ethical concerns that have come up. And it's definitely left a lot of people wondering if they plan to address any of it or if they're just kind of hoping it all fades away. So, in this episode, I want to take a closer look at the unusual way that Dr. John chose to bookend his 3.5 hour video. You know, how he opened it, how he closed it, and what those choices might say about his overall approach. So before we get started, just a quick disclaimer. I'm not a licensed psychologist and I'm not a licensed attorney. I don't have any formal expertise in professional ethics or law, and everything that you hear here is just my own opinion and commentary, and it's meant for entertainment and discussion purposes only. So, all right, let's get in it. All right, so before we jump into this video, I want to do a quick recap just to kind of make sure everybody understands what's going on and what's led us up to this point. So for anybody out there who's still a little bit confused about what this drama is really about, this is how Lauren herself kind of summed up the situation in her 9-hour live video. So Lauren says that this started as a friendship, but then it turned into a work partnership when she hired this woman, also now known as her stalker, to help her with graphics and production on her podcast. But after some private texts leaked where Lauren called her annoying, things went downhill fast. So according to Lauren, that's when this other woman started posting about Lauren on social media. And she was using Lauren's voice clips, including some secretly recorded in a courthouse. And she was implying damaging things about Lauren and her family. So Lauren says from there it escalated into real world encounters, like being filmed and confronted at court hearings and media events, and that Lauren was even having to ask the police for escorts at times because she felt unsafe. She also claims that there were attempts to interfere professionally, stuff like someone reaching out to UNLV to question Dr. John's adjunct position. And Lauren says that the university ultimately backed him on that. So eventually, Lauren filed for a civil stalking injunction in the state of Utah, but that was actually served during CrimeCon in Colorado. And she says that the police basically told the stalker woman to leave the area, but violations just continued after that. So then we get to the hearing, and it's about to happen, and that's when Law and Crime wanted to live stream it. And Lauren claims that she dropped the case in order to protect her child's privacy, but not at all because she was backing off of her claims. And overall, she talked about the heavy toll this was taking, that she was dealing with anxiety, sleeplessness, there'd been a lot of reputational damage, and really she just kind of framed the whole ordeal as targeted harassment and coercive control. So that brings us up to John's video. And Dr. John opens his analysis in a rather surprising place. He begins by talking about Brad Pitt and his affection for Brad Pitt. So I'm going to play that section. I'll probably pause it a few times and we can unpack what's going on rhetorically, ethically, and maybe try to separate some of the persuasion tricks that he's using from the actual arguments that are being discussed. So let's jump into it.
All right. Take it away.
So let's dive into this analysis. I'm going to start in a fairly peculiar, unexpected place.
Okay.
And I'm going to start with talking about Brad Pitt, the actor.
That is peculiar.
That is, it is a little peculiar, right? So the reason I want to talk about Brad Pitt is because he's an actor in my generation. He's an actor I've followed very closely over the years. He's an actor I've really appreciated. And I've really kind of watched him mature and develop and grow. And that's been somewhat inspirational to me.
Yeah,
So
you do like him. He talks about Brad Pitt.
So let me just say, so I'm going to do a little bit of my own fangirling here, I guess. But let me say that.
Okay. He did just say, I'm going to do a little fangirling. Now, there's nothing wrong with liking an actor. But declaring a fangirl status before you're doing a psychological analysis might signal some bias. I have a feeling his positive feelings about Brad, and he's got them, are going to shape this narrative. So when an argument is being built around admiration, it kind of sets things up for what's known as the halo effect. Basically, this idea that, well, he is so great at acting, therefore attacks on him must be unfair. And later on, we're going to see him extend that same halo effect to Lauren's work. So basically, he's saying, they have these great skills, they're great at their arts, so that has to equal moral goodness. And as we all know, that's not the same thing.
The reason I got to know Brad Pitt was because in 1992, he was in a movie called A River Runs Through It.
Mm-hmm.
A River Runs Through It is one of my favorite movies. It's one of my favorite books. It's a book by Norman MacLean, who was a professor of English literature at the University of Chicago for many years. He wrote this novella about his childhood growing up in Montana and how fly fishing basically saved his life. It's a brilliant book. It's a brilliant movie. Brad Pitt was in the movie. He actually played the somewhat delinquent brother. It was an interesting role that Brad Pitt would kind of reprise many times in his career, but he was very good. And
Yeah, he was.
I didn't know who he was at that time. And so I was interested. I'm like, who is this guy, right? When I watch a movie and there's actors I don't know, I'm always interested to kind of figure out who they are, where they came from. So I found that Brad Pitt actually was born and raised in a small town in Oklahoma. He was born in Shawnee, Oklahoma. And I also learned that at least some of his early career, he began in 1987. I didn't know any of his earlier movies. He did a few movies, and then he did work for a soap opera. So the evolution of his career really begins with soap operas. And, when I learned that, I thought, oh, this is interesting, right? Like, you don't see a lot of soap opera actors go on to become megastars.
True.
I mean, I guess some of them have, but I'm not aware of a lot, right? And so you've got this guy in this major movie. It's produced by Robert Redford. Robert Redford, by the way, in 1992, clearly saw talent in this young actor because Robert Redford has produced some extraordinary movies over the years. He's been in extraordinary movies. He knows the industry. He knows talent, and he picked out Brad Pitt. So shortly after that, Brad Pitt in 1995 was in a movie called Seven, and he was one of the detectives, and great job. So now my appreciation of this guy is only increasing. In 1996, he did a movie called 12 Monkeys. Many people probably don't know this movie, but I do, because it has to do with mental health, and it gets into everything I love.
Okay, so I wanted to stop the video here because I think this is an important point. And I guess maybe I would call it a persuasive process. The Dr. John is kind of beginning here, and this is his first step. So what we're seeing him do is he's opening this video with this long riff on Brad Pitt and just how he has watched him mature as an actor, and he really sets himself up as kind of a sophisticated observer of fame. This idea that he sees things that the rest of us don't. But he's also painting Brad Pitt as this, really amazing artist and talent who does great work and great art. But what we're going to see him do down the line is he's going to pivot that to Lauren. And so he's right now he's priming the audience, he's priming us to see her later in the same symbolic category as Brad Pitt, someone whose art is under attack by jealous onlookers. So it's kind of like a rhetorical ladder. So Brad Pitt is being used to create a narrative, which basically is that great artists face moral smear campaigns. So then he's going to actually try to transfer that onto Lauren, say that she is a targeted artist. But for those of us out here, this feels weird because that jump doesn't feel earned. Like, let's be honest, her platform size and Lauren's public exposure don't put her in the same category as someone like Brad Pitt or Johnny Depp or Amber Heard or Gwyneth Paltrow. So it already kind of just feels off, but I think it's important to stop and point this out because I do think this is kind of a first stop for him on the way to this persuasive plan that he's putting in place. So we'll go back to the video, but I wanted to stop and point that out real quick.
It's a post-apocalyptic novel. It's got kind of sci-fi. It's about mental health issues. Is he psychotic? Is he not? There's all kinds of philosophical issues raised in this movie, but I don't think a lot of people saw this movie.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but you love Brad Pitt too. So
but I watched this movie, and now he's extraordinary in this movie. Now my appreciation of this guy is continuing to expand. 1999, he does The Fight Club. which is a very controversial movie, gets a lot of attention. But again, I kind of see this guy's journey towards mastery, right? 2004, he does Troy. I'm skipping a lot of movies he's done, by the way. These are
Yeah,
just ones that-
yeah. Just
he does a movie, Troy, which is about the Iliad. Homer's the Iliad. I love Homer's the Iliad. It's one of my favorite books. It's a brilliant book about war. He does this. That's a risk. It's not particularly a stretch for him in this movie, but he's good. In 2008, he does Benjamin Button. He's nominated for Best Actor. He's nominated for Best Actor by the Academy. In 2011, he does Moneyball. Brilliant. He's brilliant in this movie, right? He's also nominated for Best Actor. 2014, Fury. Again, he's exceptional in this role. 2015, he does The Big Short. Every one of these roles, he sort of has a particular type in these movies, but you also, like, for me, I'm also seeing him expanding his repertoire a little bit, taking some risks, like with Troy, growing as an actor, right? So what's fascinating to me is you got this guy from an area, from Oklahoma, that you never think would become a megastar. He's really committed to his craft. He's really growing, right? And then after The Big Short, there's a bombshell in 2016. And this bombshell is that Angelina Jolie accuses him of abuse.
Yeah.
On a plane specifically, but essentially there's this war between himself and Angelina Jolie.
Two
There's
megastars.
two megastars. There's this issue over custody, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's all kinds of issues here. There's I believe
It's a bitter divorce.
It's a bitter divorce. I believe there's all kinds of accusations being levied. And before this, by the way, I should point out, like, the paparazzi are all over Brad Pitt wherever he goes.
He's married to Jennifer Aniston.
Married to Jennifer Aniston before.
Cheating scandal.
Right. There's issues about fidelity, right? Like, anything the tabloid can get their hands on, any salacious story about Brad Pitt, they're publishing that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I see this stuff, but I don't really pay much attention to it because I don't really care. I want to go to his movies. I'm invested in this guy as an actor and watching him grow and change and master his craft, right?
You're interested in his craft, his art.
Right. So it's interesting because in 2016, and I could be wrong about this, but so these allegations are levied by someone who has tremendous power in Hollywood. And I believe that because of this, there's certainly an attempt to tarnish his reputation, to maybe cancel him, right? Like, there's this whole debate about should Brad Pitt be doing movies, right? I'm sure people have mixed feelings about this. He was never formally charged with anything. He was never criminally charged. But after 2016, it does appear that a lot of his roles are lesser roles. It appears that he's doing movies that aren't quite they don't quite have the heft and the reach of movies he's done before. So the reason I read that list of movies prior to is because I don't know exactly what was going behind the scenes. I don't know if the impact of accusations was affecting his ability to get better films. Like, I just don't know. And so I'm going to leave us here for a minute. I'm going to leave us with the accusations, the trajectory of his career that apparently seems to stall around 2016, right?
Okay, so here the story shifts from Brad's filmography to now we're talking about the allegation impact, but mind you, without specifics. So this is where this analogy begins to do its hidden work. Think about this. So if the public unfairly downgraded Brad Pitt after an allegation, well, then critics of Lauren must likewise be unfair. The problem is that's a false equivalence. Whatever somebody thinks about that Hollywood saga, that's not evidence that Lauren's critics are running a smear campaign. So this is an example of a false equivalence. So I just want to point that out before we move on, but that's what's being set up here.
It means that there's this deep propensity for human beings to see others as moral, to judge them as moral, and to see themselves as good, and to judge others as either good or bad, right? In other words, I guess the way to put this is the fundamental theater in which human beings operate, which is the world, let's call it the theater, I guess, because we all have different roles, is a morality play. We live, most of us, because we put so much emphasis on morality. We essentially live in a morality play in our daily lives all the time. And this has to do with, you see this everywhere, right? People judging others, people gossiping, people spreading rumors.
Sounds like Chad Daybell's light or dark scale, if I'm going to be honest.
Well, that's
If you
part
know,
of
you
this.
know.
That's right. That's part of this.
You're either good or you're bad.
So let's get back to Brad Pitt. So now that I've talked about these ideas of what's called the essential moral self, let's get back to Brad Pitt.
Okay.
So Brad Pitt has this allegation.
I think Brad's cute, but
Yeah, that's
and
fine.
I think he's a great actor.
That's fine. Yeah.
But I haven't assessed him the way you have. I know you've always loved Brad Pitt and his craft.
Let's go back to Brad Pitt. So, and I don't want to minimize what happened, right? Like, if in fact he did abuse, or right, that's appalling. I'm obviously never.
We don't
gonna,
know what happened.
We don't know. I'm never going to support that, right? But the point is, back in 2016 when this happened, what you get.
He went through that so fast, I don't want us to miss it. He mentions Angelina Jolie's accusations of abuse, serious accusations of abuse against Brad Pitt, and then simply adds that if they're true, and he doesn't know, that would be appalling, and then he moves on. He gives it a lip service disclaimer, and then quickly pivots back to praising the work of Brad Pitt. He's minimizing serious abuse allegations in his video that centers on their family's claims of harm and safety. Basically, he's saying, well, these other people's allegations are just cancel culture. However, ours are they're real existential threats. For licensed psychologists addressing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people online, this can normalize dismissiveness around abuse claims. Talk about avoiding harm as a psychologist, and in standard 5.04 media presentations, it specifically says be careful not to mislead or trivialize. That's exactly what he's doing. This undermines his own channel's safety narrative.
In these types of situations, is you get this large kind of morality played. What you get, the best way I could describe it is that people become involved in what I would call a moral crusade.
Mm-hmm.
And the moral crusade is, I think the moral crusade exists mainly because humans are very prone to making moral judgments. And as I just said, and when they perceive someone as bad, or when someone is labeled as bad, the goal ultimately is to ostracize them from the group or groups, right? And so that in essence is an attempt to cancel someone. You label someone bad, you get them ostracized from groups, you ruin their reputation, right? Part of that was going on with Brad Pitt. And you might say, okay, so who cares? Why? Let's say this is a moral crusade that people are trying to paint Brad Pitt as evil, so he never works again in Hollywood. They're trying to get him canceled, right? To punish him for his so-called
moral
shortfalls, moral shortcomings. And I think there's something really interesting here that we need to consider that applies to our situation, and this is where this is important. The problem Angelina Jolie had in trying to make this a moral crusade was that Brad Pitt has this body of work, which is indisputably good, right? He's got this body of work, and he's becoming an actor that's mastering his craft. That's why I'm interested in the guy. Like, I love watching people master a craft.
You always say, make good art.
Right. I love excellence, right? And so I strive for that myself.
Says the valedictorian who got accepted to Harvard, Princeton, Yale, and Columbia, and said no to most of them. Sorry. I'm going to brag. But he's not a real psychologist, guys. Just pretend. I love people. Go ahead. Sorry.
I love people that strive for excellence. I see Brad Pitt as fitting that mold, right? And so when she shifts this debate into it, makes it a moral crusade, there's a big problem. And that problem is that Brad Pitt's body of work and the quality of his work are indisputably good. I mean, you know what? Some critics may disagree with me. I'm sure there's critics that hate Brad Pitt. They think he's a hacked actor, but I'm not one of those, right? And so if the goal is to cancel Brad Pitt, and you're a fan of Brad Pitt, like I am, my response to that was, okay, maybe he's got some problems in his personal life. Maybe whatever, I'm not excusing it. Maybe he feels overwhelmed by having all these kids, a massive career, be one of the biggest stars in the world. Like you and I
think he's admitted to alcoholism. He's struggling with addiction.
Right.
He's certainly not perfect. He's got some issues.
You and I
His life is messy.
You and I are such, whatever the celebrity scale is, you and I are like a pittance compared to Brad Pitt, right? I can't even imagine.
Yeah, we're not a thing.
I can't even imagine the stress and expectations and criticism this guy has to deal with, right? Like, I don't think any of us can imagine that. I can't imagine that for Taylor Swift, like some of the biggest stars in the world, The Rock. I don't know how they handle all this stuff.
I don't either.
I really don't, right? So like,
YouTube's enough for me.
So my thing is, so this is happening. There's stuff before about affairs, and I'm just like, the guy does good work. I love the fact that this guy is trying to master his craft, right? What I care about is the quality of his work,
his art, his craft,
the quality of his work. And so I think it's interesting that it's interesting that, like Brad Pitt being accused of abuse in 2016, that the situation you're in, this whole smear campaign from the start, that every bit of this is about a moral referendum on you and your character. Every bit of this is become a moral crusade, right? And what I find fascinating about that is that this debate is not happening in the realm of, oh, what's the quality of Lauren's work? What's the quality of Hidden True Crime's work, right? Like, right. I could argue with Brad Pitt, for example, that this attempt to shift the debate to this moral crusade, to this moral issue, but it's certainly an attempt to shift the debate away from his work as an artist and an actor to something else, to something about his character, to something about his morals and his right. And the question is, so, and by the way, with you weren't accused, you've never done anything like that ever. Like, you've never done anything wrong.
Well, my eyebrows are a sin.
Right. Yeah, you may have to shave those. We've received.
And I love myself some Botox.
We've received some emails. I think there's. I want to read a comment we received by Pinata Samurai. I love that name, by the way. Thanks, Pinata Samurai.
This is a comment.
This is a comment that I love that summarizes this whole thing up. We received a brilliant text a brilliant message in comments from one of our viewers. And here's what Pinata Samurai said.
Love the name, by the way.
I know. Pinata Samurai. It's so great. Next time I go to a pinata party with our son, I'm going to call myself Pinata Samurai. Quote, even if you were the devil himself, I'd still watch you. You're brilliant at what you do. You and your husband both. Right? And so the reason that's relevant.
I'm not the devil.
The reason that's relevant. I know you're not the devil. It's making a point. Obviously, you're not the devil. Only when you lock me in my cage in the garage. The reason why that's brilliant is because I think it really gets to the core of this debate, just like Brad Pitt, right? Why isn't anybody debating this on the terrain of our work? Why is this being litigated as a moral referendum?
Okay, so this is a goalpost shift. We're moving from the question of, are the criticisms valid, to now he wants us to ask, is the content entertaining enough to ignore those criticisms? Basically, that's moral licensing. Quality of work as a pass for your conduct. So Dr. John insists that people shouldn't judge Brad Pitt, or Lauren by extension, on moral grounds. He says the conversation should stay focused on the quality of their work. But that's not how moral accountability works. If someone's accused of wrongdoing, the debate is about moral conduct. You don't get to redefine the terrain of the discussion just because it's uncomfortable.
So I think there's a couple of issues here that are worth talking about. One is that there's a deliberate attempt here, I think, to shift this debate away from your work, our work, the quality of our work.
Mhm.
Like technically, Brad Pitt, I don't really care what's going on in his personal life. I'm just interested in his mastery of acting and his journey towards mastery. And I've been invested in that for a long time. As a matter of fact, I have a quote from a critic. This is recently. So Brad Pitt did a recent movie called F1, which I loved, by the way. I thought he was great. I mean, it wasn't much of a stretch for him. It was probably a very easy role, but he was fantastic. I love the movie. It was exciting. Anyway, there's a critic. Her name is Angelica Bastien. She apparently does some movie reviews for The Vulture.
Okay.
And I guess part of the debate that was going on with F1 was around this idea of, well, what if he's an abuser? Should we give any credence to this movie or to Brad Pitt as an actor? Like, shouldn't we? It was about canceling him essentially. And here's what she said.
Okay.
She said, quote, "It isn't that people don't believe what happened to Jolie on that plane. It's just that they don't care." And why is that important? Because what this critic is saying is the people understand that the humans make mistakes. Humans are imperfect. And if you want to make this into a moral crusade, then in many ways you're really negating the important point, which is that Brad Pitt is an artist who creates art. He's an actor who acts. Maybe that's the realm where he should be evaluated. Maybe that's what the critic's saying. Maybe we should pay attention to his role in this movie and whether the movie is good and how well he's acting, how well he acted in it, rather than litigating something from 2016, which, although potentially horrible, it doesn't affect his acting. I mean, it may have. It probably affected him psychologically. I'm sure he was hurt by it, maybe. I don't know. I presume. And so here with us, this whole smear campaign has been a referendum on your character. It's been a referendum. It's been a moral referendum on you and who you are, rather than a critique or analysis of your work.
Yeah.
And so I'm fascinated by that because it's hard not to say that the reason the reason why this has nothing to do with your work, although I will say we have gotten a lot of emails from people that are very praiseworthy of our work and that see this for what they see, that you've done nothing wrong. And even if you made a few mistakes, they're willing to forgive you because, as Pinata Samurai said, she loves your work. Right? I'm going to read a message we just got today.
Okay.
I'm not going to say the name because I don't know if I'm authorized, but she says, quote, "Hello, I want to tell you how much I appreciate the quality, credibility, and positive nature of your work. You don't deserve the abuse you're experiencing." I love that because it's the same thing that Pinata Samurai is saying. It's the same thing that Brad Pitt's movie critic is saying. It's, if you reframe this as a moral crusade and not about the quality of your work, it's easier to win to the smear people. It's easier to win that argument because human beings are drawn to that moral crusade. They're drawn into that morality play. For me, I'm less interested in his biography and I'm more interested in his actual art.
Yeah.
And I want to evaluate him on that terrain.
Fair.
Rather than in terms of morality, right? But it shows that human beings have this knee-jerk reaction to go after moral issues.
Yeah.
In fact, like this whole idea of cancel culture, this whole idea of harming people on the internet is based on this idea of humans being moral creatures on moral crusades, trying to assert their moral superiority.
Yeah.
With or without, most often without moral authority, but a moral authority is a tricky issue. So I don't want to get into that too much. I mean, because, ironically, I think some of the people on the smear campaign would say that their moral authority comes from God.
Yeah.
And so I think that in this smear campaign, I think there's a religious component, right? So if you have God on your side and you're right, So being right in this case means that they're morally superior, and they're right because they're trying to show that you are immoral and that you have poor character, and therefore you should be canceled. And they're trying to show that with evidence that's flimsy at best, or with evidence that, with evidence that you've seen and apologized for. I mean,
yeah.
But I just think, that's problematic. So let's take it a step further. So people are going to say, "Oh, what? So what? All right." So people people engage in this moral crusade, and people see themselves as good fundamentally and moral, blah blah blah. Who cares, right? So okay, so Brad Pitt, may have done this abusive thing. Maybe some people think they should cancel him for that. Maybe they don't care about his work, right? Like, so people are saying, maybe, all right, so they're going after you for being immoral or whatever. People are trying to cancel you. Why should we care?
By now, Dr. John has spent nearly this entire video comparing himself and Lauren to Brad Pitt, a man accused of domestic abuse, while reframing pretty much any criticism of hidden true crime as a kind of mass moral hysteria. And how does he choose to conclude this 3.5-hour defense? Well, he takes the idea of a moral crusade all the way to its extreme. And he invokes the Salem witch trials and the Crucible, suggesting that he and Lauren are modern-day victims of persecution and fantasy. So let's take a listen to how he ends this production, because what you're about to hear is less of a conclusion and more of a self-mythology.
Better.
I want to go back to this idea of a moral crusade and how important that was for this campaign. And I want to talk a little bit about, so one of the things I've been doing is revisiting the Salem witch trials, the historical record, and also Arthur Miller's interpretation in the Crucible.
Okay.
I think there's no doubt that the Salem witch trials were a moral crusade, because they were obviously, the community was engaged in a smear campaign against specific individuals that they deemed to be witches. Of course, there were no such thing as witches. It was a moral crusade because it was based in the puritanical religious and spiritual worldview of the community. So the basic idea was that if you find witches that don't exist, that you purge them, you eliminate them, right? And that's the same thing we saw in Dayville, by the way.
Yeah.
Group of people that called themselves what do they call themselves?
The Seven Gatherers.
Seven Gatherers, right. Which, not ironically, is the same label that this group uses to describe themselves. Similar dynamics. But in the book, this is the Penguin Classics version of the Crucible. There's an introduction by a literary critic. His name is Christopher Bigsby. Bigsby does a brilliant job of summarizing the critical motivations in the Crucible, also a moral crusade. 19 witches were hanged, 2 dogs were killed, and 1 person was crushed to death during the Salem witch trials in 1692. I'm going to read this line from the critic because I think it's absolutely relevant to this discussion, and I think it's a good way to end in thinking about all the motivations that this smear campaign involved, all the people that believe they have the moral authority to vilify you and dehumanize you, right? Just like they did in Salem, Massachusetts. Like, has the world really changed in 350 years? Has the world really changed that much?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm going to read this. In his hands, meaning Arthur Miller's hands, quote, this is from the introduction, quote, in Arthur Miller's hands, the ghosts of those who died have proved real enough. Even if the witches they were presumed to be were little more than fantasies conjured by a mixture of fear, ambition, frustration, jealousy, and perverted pride. That's exactly, I couldn't say it better. Those are exactly the motivations that fueled this smear campaign. Those are the motivations that fueled vilifying you, dehumanizing you. Let me read it again. The witches were presumed to be little more than fantasies conjured by a mixture of fear, ambition, frustration, jealousy, and perverted pride. Why fear? Why fear? Because I think you pose threats to people's identities. You pose threats to their self-esteem. You may have posed threats to their businesses. Not from anything you did.
I'm gonna say I didn't.
Not from anything you did. Just from running our channel, from producing good art and good content, by getting good interviews, by being a quality journalist, by being an ethical journalist. You created fear. Ambition, because all of these people were competitors. Their ambition to see you as a witch. Frustration. This group was frustrated because they couldn't control you. This group couldn't get you to conform. Jealousy. Jealousy over the quality of your work. Nothing more. Jealousy over the fact that you were growing so rapidly. Perverted pride. That's the pride to control the world. The pride to dominate the world. The pride to control other people. The pride to harass other people, to control them, to intimidate them. And most importantly, and I'm going to add with this final thought, the pride to engage in a self-righteous moral crusade against you for no reason other than pure fantasy. That's it.
That's all you got, and I don't really have a watch on. Thank you. It wasn't 9 hours. You did pretty good.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot. You didn't have to take a bathroom break. I did.
That's true. No, I took one.
Okay, you did. Oh, so did I.
So, to recap, Dr. John begins this entire production by analyzing Brad Pitt, an actor accused of abuse, and then ends it by comparing himself and Lauren to the innocent victims of the Salem witch trials. That's not a coincidence. It's a carefully constructed narrative arc, from projection to persecution, designed to turn legitimate criticism into a witch hunt and to recast accountability as moral hysteria. And when a licensed psychologist uses his credentials and psychological terminology to moralize about others, to attribute motives like jealousy, ambition, and perverted pride to real people who never consented to that analysis, it stops being commentary and it becomes an ethical issue. And it's one that undermines the trust the public places in the profession of psychology itself. So thanks for watching this episode of Docket Decoder. If you found this breakdown helpful, please hit like, subscribe, and share it with anyone you know who's following this story. I'll see you in the next one, where we'll continue exploring how professional ethics and public influence collide in the world of hidden true crime.